The world of video games is a pretty interesting place. You got your all-time greats, your games that are kind of average but are still fun, and then you got your real stinkers. And I'm going to list 100 of the worst video games that exist. This list isn't going to be ranked in any specific order because it's pretty tough to make a definitive list of the worst video games of all time, especially on your own. So don't take this as a definitive list because I'm probably going to miss a lot of games that people find completely terrible. A lot of these picks are going to be from personal experiences, so expect a heavy bias. The only rule I have for this list is that bootlegs won't be a part of it because they're bootlegs. And a lot of Steam indie trash games that are worth like 50 cents because a lot of them are pretty shitty, so this whole list would probably be filled with half of my Steam library if that was the case. Unless they're notable, I'm not going to be putting them on the list. There's also going to be a multi-parter series because I'm busy with shit, so expect a lot of delay, I guess. So, let's get started with the bottom 100 worst video games of all time. Yay! Also, just to clarify that most of these aren't going to be super in-depth reviews because I would be here forever doing that. These are probably going to be quick, like 1-minute reviews, so. So I kind of wrote these games down from whatever was on my mind, so if the order seems weird, then that's the reason. Anyways, Mindjack seemed like it would be a somewhat interesting game with its main gimmick called Mindjacking, where you can take control of an enemy and use them to fight. In action though, it really doesn't add much unless it's a special kind of enemy. Besides that, the gameplay itself is a generic third-person shooter. On initial release, this game was very buggy with frequent crashes, making it very annoying to play. It's been heavily patched, but a lot of the problems still exist, like really stupid AI, a dumb plot with dumb characters, graphics that belong in the PS2, the inability to pause during gameplay, shitty bosses, etc. Even the cover system is bad because 50% of the time, most of my bullets would hit the cover I was behind, even when the crosshair was fully away from it. While it may not be the worst thing I've played, it still isn't worth your time. Thanks, Square Enix. Can't wait to see you again later down the list. Wild Woody is pretty infamous nowadays for its awful, albeit humorous cutscenes. If the cutscenes were the only bad thing about the game, then it wouldn't be here. The major issue with the game are the level structure and controls. The level design kind of reminds me of the first Earthworm Jim, except more maze-like and harder to navigate. You need to teleport through boxes and avoid the hundreds of things trying to kill you. What doesn't help are the awful controls. Woody has a horrible jump which feels like it lags during it. Enemies are hard to kill because your main method of attacking is jumping on enemies and erasing them with Woody's butt. The hit detection is really bad, even worse when you're in a pain state. Woody does have a sketch mechanic where he'll draw something to help take out enemies, and it works pretty well. It's better than Mindjack's main gimmick at least, but it's not enough to really save the gameplay. If I could say one positive about the game, is that the soundtrack is actually pretty decent. I know it seems kind of corny, but I think that's just what makes it awesome. Oh good, another Square Enix game. The Quiet Man fucking sucks. The main gimmick with this game is that the whole game has no audio with the exception of vibration. This is because the main character of the game, Dane, is deaf. I guess they wanted to simulate how it feels to be a deaf person, but in the context of this game it just doesn't work. For one, there are no subtitles or even any visual clues during the cutscenes of what is going on in the story. These cutscenes are also very long too, like some of them can reach up to 6 minutes. The silence also doesn't help because Dane understands what all the other characters are saying, but we don't, so what's the point of removing the audio? I didn't even mention the gameplay yet, which is just a generic beat 'em up where you kill the same 2 enemies over and over and over again for 2 hours. It sucks. They even patched in a sound version a week after the game was released explaining everything. It's fucking stupid. If you want to read about it, go ahead. But I'm not going to waste your time with this dumbass story. Slender clones were pretty common back in the early 2010s. A lot of them were pretty bad, but at least they were usually free to play on like a browser or something. The Letter is not one of those games. Released on the Wii U for $3, The Letter has you play as Michael, who is trying to find his father who disappeared for some reason. If you've played Slender, this game acts the same, where you walk around a big map to find 6 objects. Unlike Slender though, there's no threat. No monster chases you no matter how many items you find, so you're left walking around in the dark finding stupid crap. So what's the point of this game, you might ask? I'll tell you, absolutely fucking nothing. You wasted $3. Thank you. Goodbye. Probably not gonna make friends with this one. Shadow the Hedgehog. At first it seems like it might be kind of fun because what other Sonic game has one of the characters shooting realistic guns? None of them. The major problem with the game though is the overall design. The branching path seems like it could have worked, but the missions you need to complete to go down said paths are repetitive and tedious. The alternate paths don't even matter because the last story mode retcons all 10 endings. All the levels are confusing to navigate because there is no map or compass pointing you towards your objective. It also doesn't help that the levels are huge and bleak with no outstanding landmarks. Just take a look at Lost Impact. That level fucking sucks ass. Finding all the perfect chaos in that level is awful. It can take over an hour the first time playing. The controls are really slippery and don't work for the overall design of this game. This game just outright sucks, and I really don't... I can't understand how people can enjoy this game. I really can't. I'm sorry. There's a lot of Wii shovelware out there, but none are as well known as Ninja Breadman. Our lovely friends at Dai Design gave us a platformer from the PS2 with hand-fisted motion controls that don't work in the slightest. You have to shake the nunchuck to jump, which works as well as you think it does. The game itself is simple and really short, taking less than an hour to beat because it only has 4 levels counting the tutorial. And I can't forget about the other 3 platformers Dai Design made: Rock'n'Roll Adventures, Trixie in Toyland, and Anubis II. They're all the same exact game with just different graphics. Seriously, the same enemies and objectives. Only on the Wii you could get away with making the same stupid ass game 4 times. They could have just combined it into one game. But nope, gotta maximize your profits somehow. Fuck you, Dai Design. I'm glad you're gone. Long development can really hurt a game. We'll see a few more down the line, but let's start with Dai Katana. Dai Katana is infamous for its shaky development, going through several different changes. In the end, the game we got isn't complete trash, but it's not that much fun either. Weapons all have their own quirk to them, making them very awkward to use. You have limited saves on each level, making each level a chore to go through, and they're not small levels either. Your partner AI is dumb as rocks, and they constantly get stuck on terrain or get shot constantly, and you need these guys to follow you to actually finish the stage. Dai Katana in its original state is unbearable to play. If you do want to check it out, I recommend you download the newest patch for the game, which fixes a majority of the issues. You can actually remove the AI completely, making the game way easier to go through. Even if you do bring them in, they have infinite health and ammo, but they still get stuck constantly, so just remove them. Another game with a large amount of hype behind it, Two Worlds was slated to be the next open-world fantasy RPG on the same level as Oblivion. Too bad it was all a lie. The game is plagued with bad graphics, dumb AI, quests that mainly consist of walking back and forth to different spots, and the beyond atrocious voice acting.
You are the mercenary of whom I have heard. Welcome.
This sounds as if you're in need of my modest talents.
Indeed. I have a small problem and I want someone whom I can trust.
How do you know you can trust me?
Ferret Redissimus, a friend of mine, told me that you are trustworthy. Now to business.
Two Worlds was so bad, in fact, the developers sent out apology notes to retailers stating that they were sorry that the game sucked complete ass. They at least made up for it with a sequel which also isn't great, but it's way better than this hunk of crap. Bad Day LA is an odd one for me. Created by American McGee, who also created the Alice games, Bad Day LA is a very weird Postal clone with political satire thrown into the mix. On the surface, it doesn't sound like the worst thing ever, but in execution, it really fucked up. A lot of the satirical humor doesn't really work because of the horrible timing for each joke, mixed with the really poor voice acting and annoying characters. It's almost as bad as Two Worlds voice acting. Even if it was well acted, the jokes themselves are not really well written and are more offensive than funny. The gameplay is jank and tedious with very little in terms of variety. The graphics are okay-ish. I kind of like what they were going for, but it really didn't work out. This game had the potential to be pretty good, but oh well. Operation Matriarchy is one of the strangest plots I've experienced in a game. There's a virus floating around that only targets female life, turning them into human killing machines, while the male populace all become enslaved, being used for food, or being turned into weird mutants. You awake from hypersleep when your ship is under attack by these creatures. It doesn't sound too bad, and the game doesn't really look that awful to play. But the problems start to fly in real fast. The AI is so awful because they all just bum rush you down. There are very little sound effects with the exception of gunfire and grunts, and there's no music. The level design is okay for the most part, but is sadly brought down to the copious amount of enemies they shove into each room, and the gameplay really doesn't shake up much. It's a real shame. This game probably could have been good. I don't know what it was to create games based around the Bible, but there are a bunch of them. Catech Human is probably one of the better ones, but it still isn't amazing. What really brings the game down is the insane difficulty. The AI moves so awkwardly and fast that hitting them is tough to do, not to mention that they can deal an insane amount of damage, even on the easy skill. The level design isn't anything special and have become way too dark in some areas, making enemies almost impossible to see. There's a good variety of weapons, but most of them don't work well with the fast-paced gameplay. A lot of them are projectile-based instead of hit-scan-based, which really doesn't work. I do have a review on this game. It's one of the first ever video game reviews I've done. It's not a great review because, it was the first one I did, but if you're curious, check it out. They don't shove a bunch of Bible shit down your throat for most of the game, so it isn't too bad. Oh good, it's this game again. Drake of the 99 Dragons is awful in every sense of the word. I did a whole 20-minute review on this game showcasing how bad it is. But to summarize, the game suffers from bad controls, awful camera, dumb plot, broken mechanics, bad voice acting, long load times, and crappy graphics. To think that the developers wanted this game to launch a whole series complete with sequels, comics, and even a TV show. If they really wanted that to become reality, they should have put more effort into this train wreck of a game. How come when developers want to make a video game bigger than it was, they put no effort into it? Why does that happen? That happens all the time. Stupid. Rascal had the Rascal had the potential to be a decent game. Looking at it from this clip, it has really good graphics. It has what feels like 60 FPS on the PS1. I'm not sure if it's 60 FPS, it could be like 48, but that's still pretty impressive. However, some executive thought it would be a good idea to change the controls late into development. See, this game was originally going to have controls and a camera similar to Mario 64. Last minute changes swapped them to tank controls instead. And this game just does not work with these controls, especially since now the camera is all screwed up because of it. Besides the controls, if you don't have the manual, you'll have no idea what is going on and what you're supposed to be doing during the gameplay, because there's literally no dialogue or anything to read. It's a real shame. This game could have been an underrated gem. Too bad. Mario is missing, and Mario's Time Machine. I lumped these two together because they're both similar games. Both of these titles sound pretty neat, but it's all a facade. Mario's Time Machine sounds like an epic platformer where you go through different parts throughout time and fight bad guys, while Mario's Missing can be an epic quest where you save Mario. It is the first game to star Luigi too, which is interesting. Unfortunately, what you'll find instead are edutainment games. Games that are meant to teach you about historical stuff. While I think both games do a decent job at teaching you things, what's the point? I play video games to avoid learning. They could have made the gameplay itself fun at least. Especially in the case of Mario is Missing, where you just walk back and forth constantly and occasionally kill a Koopa and then talk to somebody. It's not interesting. I can't imagine how many kids were disappointed when they got this thinking it was something better. Sorry, little Timmy, you gotta learn for Christmas. Hey guys, do me a favor and never play Leisure Suit Larry Box Office Bus. This game is truly one of the most bland and obnoxious games I've sat through. Unlike other Larry games, where they were adventure games with witty humor, Box Office Bus is a platformer with humor only middle schoolers would find funny. I don't know whose idea it was to turn this game into a platformer, but they need to be fired. The gameplay is super dull and not very challenging. The main draw, I assume, would have to be the dialogue. give them some credit at least. They got a lot of big name actors to voice in this game, such as Josh Keaton and Patrick Warburton. While they do a good job reading the script itself is bad. Most of the humor comes from just the characters swearing constantly, or bad sex jokes. I think the only time I laughed was at an out-of-place fart joke. A fart joke. Yeah, that's how dull this whole experience was. One singular fart was funny. Oh, and if you're expecting any sex scenes, they're not in the game either. Sorry. Expecting a game that was in development for 15 years to be good is pretty much unreasonable. Duke Nukem Forever sadly falls into development hell, and the end product isn't the worst thing ever, but it isn't anything worth playing, similar to Dai Katana. Rather than having big levels, finding keys, and a large battalion of weapons, it's your generic brown and black cover-based shooter. You can only have a max of 4 weapons on you at all times. This was patched in later, however, only on the PC. I did enjoy some locales, like the Duke Burger and the Ghost Town, but everything else was a slog to play through. The story is stupid and all the characters are either obnoxious, Dylan, or completely stupid. Console ports are even worse with texture pop-in, long load time, screen tearing, you name it. Thank you, Randy, for fucking up another beloved franchise. I'd still rather play this than Aliens Colonial Marines. Oh, yeah, I'll get to that one soon enough. God, that one's awful.
Hello, I'm Captain Evelyn, and I have diabetes.
We're back with another edutainment game. This time with a game that teaches you about diabetes. Why in the world would somebody make a game about diabetes? It's actually a well-disguised ad for a brand of insulin called Novolin. But how about the game? It's boring. Captain Novolin can only jump and walk forward. You need to collect milk and bananas in order to keep your blood sugar low while avoiding bouncing donuts and walking snacks. Sounds exciting, I know. The graphics, music, everything about this game is a disgrace. Did I mention the whole point of this game is to give insulin to the mayor of the town before he dies? No? Well, that's it. I feel bad for the kids who had diabetes themselves and were forced to play this game. That would suck. If you wanted to play a rhythm game with no rhythm, then just play VIP. Based on the show of the same name, VIP has you take control of some of the characters in the show, most notably Pamela Anderson, known for her huge personality. The whole game is just pressing the right buttons in order for whatever pops up on the screen. There's also some shooting segments, but it's just moving the crosshair over the guy and then pressing the button. The graphics are pretty bad and the music is grating after a while. You're better off watching the show it's based on. It's probably not half bad. Maybe, I don't know, I've never seen the show, but the game sucks. When beloved series go through a reboot phase, most of the time they end up sucking ass. Bomberman Act Zero was one reboot that sucked major ass. Firstly, all of the cool characters from the previous games are all gone and replaced with these edgy robots with no personality to them at all. The gameplay is a bare-bones Bomberman with only slightly new features, that being the first-person mode, which is more of a third-person mode, and you can't even see most of the board, so there's no point, and it doesn't add much besides that. The single-player mode is tedious, as it's essentially the same level over and over again for 100 levels. If you die, game over, no saving or anything. The AI is fucking annoying because they're either dumb as dirt or avoid all of your bombs. It's frustrating. The multiplayer is non-existent because they removed local co-op play and you're stuck with just online players. Like you're going to find anyone nowadays to play this crap. Who thought this game was a good idea? What even happened here? Dragon Ball Z Sagas is probably one of the most dull and boring beat-em-ups I've ever played. Most of the game you just spam the same stupid combo over and over again because most of the combos barely make a difference. All of the enemies are the same and just charge you down. Boss fights are tedious and long, and this entire game is extremely buggy, so there will be some instances where bosses like Android 17 fall through the floor. The graphics are ugly and looks on par with Superman 64 in all honesty. You're better off playing Dragon Ball Advance Adventure on the Game Boy. That game is awesome. I have a whole review on Dragon Ball Z Sagas too, so if you want to check that out, go ahead. Okay, before I talk about Balls 3D, you need to hear the title theme for the SNES version. Oi! 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 If I didn't know any better, I would assume this was some weird porno remix. Anyway, Balls 3D plays like the title. Balls. The controls are really bad that pulling off basic combos is hard to do. It's hard to tell what any of the characters are doing because they're all made of balls. The AI is completely unfair because they have no problem kicking in your balls. The sound effects are annoying, constant slowdown, and the background messages on the billboard are just weird. It's not the worst fighting game, but it still sucks. Balls. Video games based on theme parks seem like a great idea. It's pretty expensive to go to a lot of the big named ones like Disney, so creating an experience you can play in the comfort of your home seems novel. Unfortunately, most of the time that doesn't happen. Universal Studios Theme Park Adventure is one of the worst examples of this. Instead of just making a game where you can simulate the many attractions of the park, you run around picking up garbage and putting into trash cans. That's the bulk of the gameplay. No shit. There are rides to go on, but if you don't have enough points, you can't enter them, so you gotta pick up trash to get enough points. The rides themselves are just minigames. Just okay minigames at best. It's not worth your time to grind up a bunch of points just to play these minigames that only last for barely a few minutes. Don't even get me started on navigating through this game with its fixed camera angles and retarded directionless design. Unless you know the park, you'll get lost. Fuck this game. Did you know there was a sequel to Superman 64? It was just under the guise of Aquaman, Battle for Atlantis on the GameCube. The similarities to both of these games is astounding, honestly, especially in the way you traverse levels and pick up stuff. First off, the cutscenes are atrocious. They're just still comic book style panels with no voice acting or anything like that. The gameplay is dull. Most of the time you just mash one button to beat up the same enemy over and over and over and over and over again. Even though you're in the ocean, there are invisible walls everywhere, so navigation sucks. The graphics are ugly and there's no life at all throughout the place. Aren't I supposed to be at Atlantis? Where's everybody? This game is not even worth 5 minutes of your time. Don't bother. Another bad fighting game. Oh boy. Kabuki Warriors was one of the earlier original Xbox titles, similar to Drake of the 99 Dragons. But just like Drake, it sucks. All you have to do in this game is just mash one button because the AI in this game is awful and can't do shit against it. The character selection is awful because all of them look exactly the same, with the only difference being a slightly different looking face. And why are they all completely white? It's like they dunked themselves in mayo or something. The graphics and the sound are bad, and that's pretty much all there is to say. There's nothing in this game that is good. Maybe you can find it so bad it's good or something like that. I don't know. It sucks. Don't play it. To wrap up this first part, let's talk about Postal 3. I really like Postal 2. It's stupid and broken, but extremely fun. I've heard a lot of shit about Postal 3, and you know what? It's all completely justified because this game is truly a train wreck. I guess for some positives, the graphics aren't too bad, and the soundtrack is actually very good. The gameplay is a mainly linear level-by-level affair with branching paths partway through. The whole morality system this game implements does not work for this series. Making the Postal Dude seem like a nice guy is impossible. This is the Postal Dude we're talking about. Guy who kills people. Going down the good path is hard to do anyway because one slight fuck up ruins it all. Most of the gameplay is just shooting down hordes of whatever enemy the game decides to throw onto you. Hippies, terrorists, eco-terrorists, animals, you get the idea. Most of the weapons are really ineffective, especially all of the melee weapons which do absolutely nothing. The enemy AI isn't very good because most of the time they just walk out into the open and allow themselves to get shot, including teammates if you have them. Again, making the good path part of the story more frustrating to play because if you accidentally kill one of your teammates, the good path is lost forever. The amount of bugs and glitches I ran into were aggravating as well. The physics on some of the objects in the game are insane, and a lot of the time you can be flung straight into the air and get stuck. I actually had to restart the whole damn game because the dude was stuck in the ground when a new level started. Reloading didn't work either, and I couldn't figure out how to turn on no clip. The game has constant slowdown and frequent crashes to boot. At least Postal 2 was fun, so I didn't mind the crashes. This game really has nothing going for it. Also, my antivirus software treated this as a virus, so if that doesn't turn you away, I don't know what will.